Today we're going to change the brake pads on the Peugeot 308 with the T9 body. The process isn't very hard, so let's get started. We jack up the car, unscrew the wheel and remove it. And we see this picture. First, we need to remove the protective caps to access the guides. We take a 7-sided hexagon and an open-end wrench. We attempt to remove the guides. You can use a ratchet after that. And once the guides are unscrewed, remove the spring. I've never removed the bracket, and I think it was also removed a long time ago before me. This caused a bit of trouble, but some patience, and a hammer solves this problem. Here's what the old pads look like. The wear is significant, and if you think that you could have driven more, here's what the new pads look like. Next, we need to retract the piston inside so the new pads can fit, and if the front piston can be easily pushed back, then the rear one needs to be pressed in and screwed in clockwise at the same time. For this, there are special tools. Naturally, you can do everything by hand if you're motivated. Here's a little schematic drawing. This is what our tool looks like, and you need this. We take a bolt. I took what I found in the garage on. We carve a groove in the bolt and cut out a plate like this. Now, the distance may be slightly different if you do not own a 308 Peugeot. But the gist remains the same. So, in this plate, there should only be one hole. But as stated, I made it from what was available, which has no influence on its functionality. The nut should look like this. There's really not much to comment on. When the puller is in your hands, before pushing out the cylinder, you need to take something blunt and carefully go around the edge of the rubber band, the boot. Why do this? Possibly, the boot stuck or even adhered somewhere, and if you start screwing in right away, you might accidentally rip it. The next step is to grab our tool and start pushing the piston into the cylinder. With the help of 3 brushes, it'll go super easy. Turn it clockwise. Next, once it's all worked out, check if the holes on the piston line up with the raised edges on the pads. It's possible the pads won't have any raised edges. Not at all, but it's unlikely. After that, we can put the new pads in their places and put everything back together. When I change pads, I like to use the Liquid Moly's anti-script paste. I have some experience with it, and I can say that it works. It helped me out a lot with my old Opel, but to be honest, it only lasts about 1 season. Summer or winter. Then it starts to squeak again. It really depends on the pads, the discs, and how you use the car. How and where to apply the paste. You need to put a thin layer on all the outer surfaces of the pad that touch the caliper, just like the top. Brake pads. So the edges that go along with these guides, let me repeat, very little of this lubricant is needed. Well, we put everything back together as it was. As for the pads that I installed, it turns out, on our Belarusian market, there's not a wide selection of brake pads for my car. Data car specifications are displayed on the screen. I read some reviews, chose Remsa pads after reading few articles on Drive. They are relatively inexpensive, costing around $20 or 1,500 Russian rubles. What can I tell about these pads? I've driven about 300 to 400 kilometers on them. Overall, I'm happy with everything except one thing. The first, perhaps 100 kilometers or so, until they were worn in. The pads squeaked, despite the presence of anti-squeak paste. After 100 kilometers of running, all was well. Pads are just pads. Nothing extraordinary, and nothing to consider negative. Well, that's all from me. Please subscribe to the channel. I release informative and interesting videos on a periodic basis. Everyone, take care on the roads. Bye-bye.